The courtroom was filled with muffled laughter. The judge, an older man with a thick mustache and a towering presence, leaned forward with a smirk. He tapped his gavel against the bench, his voice dripping with mockery. "So, let me get this straight," he said, shaking his head. "You, some teenager who probably still asks permission to stay up past bedtime, think you're qualified to argue a case in my courtroom?" More chuckles from the audience. The bailiff grinned. Even the opposing attorney, a middle-aged man in a crisp navy blue suit, smirked. The girl standing at the defendant's table barely reached 5 feet. She had a round face, brown eyes, and long black hair tied into a neat ponytail. She wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans, looking completely out of place among the sharp-dressed lawyers. Her name was Sophia Carter. She didn't blink. The judge leaned back in his chair, sighing dramatically. "Tell me, Miss Carter, did you watch some courtroom dramas on TV and decide you'd give this whole law thing a try?" He chuckled. "Or maybe you think representing yourself is some kind of high school debate contest." The audience chuckled again. Sophia tilted her head. "Your Honor," she said in a steady, clear voice, "would you like me to cite the specific case law that gives me the right to represent a defendant in this trial?" The courtroom went silent. The judge's smile faltered. Sophia reached into her backpack, pulled out a thick law book, and placed it on the table with a thud. "Or would you rather I recite the precedent set by Gideon versus Wainwright? That should clarify things." The judge's face twitched. Sophia clasped her hands together and tilted her head. "No? Would you rather I go over the Bar Association's specific policies on pro bono representation?" The silence stretched. A bead of sweat rolled down the judge's temple. Nobody was laughing now. 2 weeks earlier, Sophia stood outside the courthouse, gripping her backpack straps. The cold autumn wind made her shiver, but she barely noticed. She was staring at the giant marble pillars of the courthouse, her heart pounding. This was it. This was her chance. Her best friend, Alex, nudged her shoulder. "You ready for this?" Sophia took a deep breath. "No, but I don't have a choice." Alex grinned. "That's the spirit." Sophia gave him a weak smile, but her mind was racing. Everything had happened so fast. Just 3 days ago, she had been sitting in her high school library, minding her own business, when a frantic woman had rushed in. Mrs. Davis, the kind old janitor, had tears in her eyes as she whispered something to the librarian. Moments later, the librarian had turned to Sophia. "Sophia," she had said, "you need to see this." And that was when she learned the horrible news. Mrs. Davis's son, Tyler, had been arrested. Wrongfully. For something he hadn't done. Sophia had known Tyler since she was a kid. He was a quiet, nerdy guy who spent most of his time fixing computers and helping out at the library. There was no way he could have committed the crime they were accusing him of. But the police didn't care. They had him in cuffs before he even knew what was happening. His court-appointed lawyer? A man who barely looked at his case file. His trial? Scheduled in just a few days. And his chances? 0. Unless someone did something. Unless someone knew the law. And that was when Sophia made a decision that would change everything. Because she did know the law. Not in the way most teenagers did. Sophia had spent years studying legal textbooks. She had memorized case law, watched trials online, and debated ethics with actual lawyers in online forums. She wasn't just a random high schooler. She was a genius. And she wasn't going to let Tyler go to jail for something he didn't do. So she did the impossible. She walked into the courthouse and filed a motion to represent him. The clerk had laughed in her face. The security guards had told her to go home. The opposing attorney had smirked, telling her she was wasting her time. But Sophia didn't back down. She presented her case. She argued the law. She cited rules and regulations. And to everyone's shock, the judge had to approve it, because the law was on her side. And that was how she ended up here, standing in front of the most powerful judge in the county, being mocked, laughed at, underestimated. But that was okay, because they had no idea what was coming next. And by the time this trial was over, the entire world would know Sophia Carter's name. The judge cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice a little less mocking now, "this isn't a game. You're representing a young man facing serious charges. You understand that, don't you?" Sophia nodded. "I understand, Your Honor." "Do you really?" The judge narrowed his eyes. "Because if you make a mistake, you could ruin this boy's life. Do you really want that responsibility?" Sophia met his gaze without flinching. "Do you?" The judge froze. Sophia straightened her back. Because if I let some careless lawyer defend him, and they mess up, he goes to prison. And if you don't let me defend him, knowing I've done my research, knowing I care about his case more than anyone in this room, then that's on you, Your Honor. The judge's fingers curled against his desk. The courtroom was so silent you could hear a pin drop. The opposing attorney smirked, folding his arms. Your Honor, he said, if she wants to embarrass herself, let her. It'll make my job easier. The judge sighed. He rubbed his temples. And then, he banged the gavel. Fine, he said. You want to play lawyer, Miss Carter? Then let's see if you can handle it. Sophia didn't blink. She just smiled, because she had just won her first battle. But the war? The war was just beginning. The moment the judge banged his gavel, Sophia knew she had just stepped onto a battlefield. The courtroom, which had been filled with laughter minutes ago, was now silent. The opposing attorney, Mr. Douglas, leaned back in his chair with an amused smirk, as if he were watching a child attempt to juggle knives. The audience, once entertained by the judge's mockery, was now watching with cautious curiosity. Sophia exhaled slowly. The judge sighed. All right, we'll proceed. The prosecution may begin with opening statements. Mr. Douglas stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He strode to the center of the courtroom like a performer stepping onto a Broadway stage. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, his voice smooth and confident. We are here today because the state has evidence. Strong evidence. Evidence that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Tyler Davis, is guilty of grand larceny. Sophia clenched her fists. Douglas continued, pacing dramatically. On the night of October 12th, a high-end electronics store was burglarized. Thousands of dollars worth of laptops and gaming consoles were stolen. And do you know who was caught on security cameras at the scene? He turned sharply, pointing straight at Tyler. Sophia saw Tyler flinch. Douglas turned back to the jury. Tyler Davis, the young man sitting before you today. A murmur rippled through the audience. Douglas smiled. The evidence doesn't lie. The footage shows him entering the store, leaving the store, and when the police searched his home, they found stolen electronics. Sophia could hear a few gasps from the jury. Douglas's voice softened. Now I understand. He's young. Maybe he made a mistake. Maybe he got caught up in something bigger than himself. But mistakes have consequences. He took a slow step forward, and the law doesn't bend for anyone. He turned to the judge and nodded. The prosecution rests. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Miss Carter, he said, glancing at Sophia. Do you wish to make an opening statement? Sophia rose to her feet, ignoring the way her heart hammered against her ribs. She stepped forward. She looked at the jury, and she smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, there's only one thing you need to know about this case. She turned her head and pointed, not at Tyler, but at Mr. Douglas. The prosecution, she said slowly, is lying to you. Gasps. The judge blinked. Douglas scoffed. Objection, Your Honor. I withdraw the statement. Sophia held up a hand before the judge could respond. Let me rephrase. She turned back to the jury. The prosecution is misleading you. Douglas clenched his jaw. Sophia took a slow step forward, mirroring his earlier theatrics. You were just told that Tyler was caught on security cameras, that when police searched his home, they found stolen electronics. She tilted her head. But do you know what they didn't tell you? She let the silence drag. Where is the footage? The jury exchanged glances. Sophia nodded. Where is the footage? She turned to Douglas. Did you submit it into evidence? Douglas's face twitched. Sophia turned back to the jury. No, because it doesn't exist. The audience gasped again. Douglas stepped forward. Your Honor. Sophia raised her hand. Let me finish. She turned back to the jury. And those so-called stolen electronics? Did the police find Tyler's fingerprints on them? His DNA? Any proof they belonged to him? Silence. Sophia spread her hands. No, because there is no proof. The only thing the prosecution has is a theory, and theories don't send innocent people to prison. She paused, letting her words settle. By the time this trial is over, she said, I promise you, there will be no doubt in your minds that Tyler Davis is not guilty. She turned to the judge. The defense rests. For the first time since the trial started, nobody was laughing anymore. After court adjourned for the day, Sophia walked down the courthouse steps, her head spinning. Alex was waiting for her at the bottom, his hands stuffed into his hoodie pockets. That, he said, grinning, was amazing. Sophia exhaled, rubbing her temples. I don't know if it was amazing or stupid. Alex laughed. Both. She sighed, glancing over her shoulder. The judge had been skeptical, but he hadn't stopped her. And Mr. Douglas? He looked more annoyed than worried, but she could tell she had rattled him. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Alex nudged her. You okay? No, she admitted. Tyler's still facing years in prison. And I just poked a bear. Alex frowned. What do you mean? She sighed. Douglas isn't stupid. If I humiliated him today, he's going to come at me harder tomorrow. Alex shrugged. Then humiliate him again. Sophia smirked despite herself. Easier said than done. They started walking toward the bus stop. The courthouse was massive, with its towering columns and marble steps. People in business suits walked in and out, barely glancing at the teenage girl who had just shaken up the system. As they reached the sidewalk, Alex turned to her. So, what's the plan? Sophia chewed her lip. Find the footage. Alex blinked. The footage that doesn't exist? Sophia shook her head. It has to exist. Douglas wouldn't have mentioned it unless he thought it was real. She stared at the pavement. Which means it's either being hidden or faked. Alex's eyebrows shot up. Wait, you think someone is covering it up? Sophia clenched her fists. I know they are. And that meant one thing. If she didn't find it before the next court session, Tyler was doomed. That night, Sophia sat in her room, her laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. She had to find out where the footage was. If the prosecution claimed to have it, then it had to exist somewhere. But if it wasn't in court records, someone was hiding it. Or worse, someone had altered it. Sophia narrowed her eyes, clicking through security footage archives, hacking into public records, searching, digging. And then, she found it. Her breath caught. She clicked the file, her heart pounding. The security footage from the electronics store. Finally, she would see it for herself. But when the video started playing, her stomach dropped. Because the person on the screen, the person walking into the store, was Tyler. Or at least, it looked like Tyler. Sophia's hands trembled. Something wasn't right. She rewound the footage, playing it in slow motion. And then she saw it. A flicker. A glitch. Something off. Her heart stopped. This footage. It wasn't real. It had been doctored. And that meant someone had set Tyler up. Sophia's pulse thundered in her ears as she stared at the screen. The video was fake. Someone had altered the footage to make it look like Tyler had been at the scene of the crime. But who? And why? She dragged the progress bar back, watching frame by frame. Her eyes flicked over every detail. The way Tyler walked, the shadows on the ground, the reflection in the store's glass window. And then she saw it. A flicker. A tiny inconsistency. The shadow cast by Tyler didn't match the store's lighting. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just some mistake in security footage. This was deliberate. Someone had planted this video as evidence. And if she didn't prove it before court resumed in the morning, Tyler would be convicted based on a lie. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. She had to find the original footage. The unedited version. But where? She leaned back, rubbing her temples. The prosecution must have had access to the original. There was no way they could have doctored it themselves. Which meant, the store. The original footage had to be there. Sophia's chest tightened. The only way to prove Tyler's innocence was to get into that store and retrieve the real footage. And she had less than 12 hours to do it. She grabbed her phone and called Alex. You do realize it's almost midnight, right? He answered groggily. I found the footage, Sophia whispered. There was a pause. Then, Alex's voice sharpened. And, it's fake. Silence. Then, meet me outside in 5. 10 minutes later, they were crouched behind a row of parked cars across from the electronics store. The street was empty. The city was asleep. The store's metal security shutters were down, and a red light blinked near the door, signaling the alarm system was active. Alex peered over the hood of a car. So, what's the plan? Please don't say we're breaking in. Sophia exhaled. We're not breaking in. Alex relaxed. We're just gaining unauthorized access to legally obtain crucial evidence. Alex groaned. Sophia. She held up a small USB stick. I just need to get inside and plug this into their system. It'll copy all security footage from that night, and we'll have the original video. And how exactly do you plan to get inside? Sophia bit her lip. She had thought about this. The store had an alarm system, but it was also a chain store with a predictable security rotation. She had found the schedule online. There's a 10-minute window between when the guard on duty leaves for his lunch break and when the next shift starts, she whispered. That's when we go in. Alex stared at her. You researched this? Sophia shrugged. I study things. Alex ran a hand down his face. This is insane. It's our only chance. He groaned. Fine. But if we go to jail, I'm telling them this was all your idea. Sophia grinned. Deal. They waited. At exactly 12:43 a.m., the security guard, a burly man in a gray uniform, locked the front door and walked down the street toward the 24-hour diner. Sophia and Alex darted across the road. Sophia pulled out a paperclip. You actually know how to pick locks? Alex whispered. Sophia smirked. I read about it once. Alex groaned. That doesn't mean you can. Click. The lock turned. Sophia pushed open the door. Alex blinked. Okay, that was impressive. Shoo. She slipped inside. The store was dark. Rows of neatly stacked laptops, phones, and gaming consoles surrounded them. A security camera in the corner blinked red. Sophia pointed. There. The main computer. They crept toward the counter. Sophia plugged in the USB and pulled up the system. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Come on, come on. The files appeared. October 12th. She clicked on the video. The original security footage started playing. And there it was. The real thief. A man in a ski mask, dressed in all black. Not Tyler. Sophia's chest tightened. She copied the files onto the USB. But just as the progress bar reached 90%, the front door rattled. Alex tensed. Someone's coming. Sophia's heart stopped. The guard was back. And he wasn't alone. Flashlights swept through the store. Security alarm's been tripped, a voice said. Someone's in here. Sophia yanked out the USB and shoved it in her pocket. Alex grabbed her arm. What now? She scanned the room. The only exit was the front door, and that was not an option. Then, the storage closet. Come on, she whispered, pulling Alex toward it. They slipped inside just as the front door swung open. The voices grew louder. There's no sign of a break-in. Maybe just a system glitch. A flashlight beam swept past the closet door. Sophia held her breath. A long pause. Then, let's check the back room. The footsteps faded. Sophia exhaled. We need to go? Now. Alex nodded. They slipped out of the closet and darted for the door. The second they were outside, they ran. They didn't stop running until they reached the next block. Sophia doubled over, panting. Alex groaned. I'm never doing that again. Sophia pulled out the USB and held it up. We got it, she said breathlessly. Alex grinned. We got it. But just as they started celebrating, a pair of headlights flooded the street. A black car screeched to a stop in front of them. Sophia's stomach dropped. The door opened, and a man in a suit stepped out. Mr. Douglas, the prosecutor. His eyes locked onto Sophia, and he smiled. Well, he said. You've been busy. Sophia clenched her fists, because she knew. This wasn't just about the case anymore. Douglas had been watching her, and now, the real fight was about to begin. Sophia's pulse pounded as Mr. Douglas took a slow step toward them. The city street, once so empty, now felt like a trap. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows as his polished black shoes clicked against the pavement. Alex shifted uneasily beside her. This is bad, he muttered. Sophia didn't respond. She was too busy calculating her next move. Douglas stopped a few feet away, his hands casually in his pockets. He looked calm, almost amused, like a cat watching two mice scurry in the dark. You've been busy, he repeated, tilting his head. His eyes flicked towards Sophia's pocket, the one holding the USB. Sophia's fingers curled into a fist. Douglas smiled. Now, I wonder, what would a high school girl be doing sneaking into a closed electronics store in the middle of the night? He sighed, shaking his head. That doesn't look very good, does it? Alex tensed. Are you threatening us? Douglas chuckled. Threatening? No. He took another slow step forward. I'm just concerned. You see, breaking and entering is a serious crime. I'd hate to see you both in a jail cell before morning. Sophia gritted her teeth. She knew what he was doing. He wanted them scared, wanted them to feel powerless. But Sophia wasn't powerless. Not anymore. She took a step closer, lifting her chin. You could call the cops, she said, her voice steady. You could tell them we broke in. Douglas smirked. I could. Sophia crossed her arms. But then I'd have to tell the judge that the security footage the prosecution is using as evidence is fake. Douglas's smirk twitched. Sophia smiled sweetly. And I just so happen to have the original footage. Silence. Douglas's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Sophia knew she had him. He exhaled through his nose. You're an interesting one, Miss Carter. I get that a lot. Douglas chuckled, shaking his head. All right, you got your little victory tonight. But let me give you some advice. His voice lowered. You're playing in a world you don't understand. The law isn't about right and wrong. It's about who has the most power. Sophia didn't flinch. Then I'll just have to take the power. Douglas studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. We'll see about that. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. Sophia and Alex didn't move until the black sedan disappeared down the street. Only then did Alex let out a breath. That was the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. Sophia exhaled slowly. He's scared. Alex gave her a seriously? Look, he's scared? I thought he was about to have us thrown into a van. Sophia shook her head. He wouldn't have bothered coming himself if he wasn't worried. Alex frowned. So what now? Sophia glanced at the USB in her hand. Now. She took a deep breath. We win this case. The next morning, the courtroom was buzzing. Word had spread. The teenage girl defending a criminal case? People were talking about it. Lawyers, reporters, even random people who had heard about it online. Sophia ignored the whispers as she walked into the courtroom, Tyler beside her. He was nervous. She wasn't. She had what she needed. The judge sighed as he took his seat. Miss Carter, I assume you're ready? Sophia nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Douglas stood, straightening his tie. The prosecution would like to present its primary piece of evidence, the security footage showing the defendant committing the crime. He handed a flash drive to the bailiff, who plugged it into the courtroom monitor. The video began to play, and there it was, the fake footage. A blurry figure entering the electronics store, dressed exactly like Tyler. People in the audience murmured. It looked convincing. Douglas smiled. As you can see, the defendant. Objection. The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Carter. Sophia stepped forward, her heart steady. She pulled out her own USB. If the prosecution is presenting that footage as evidence, she said, then the defense would like to present this footage. Douglas frowned. What is this? The real footage, Sophia said. The audience gasped. Douglas's jaw clenched. The judge sighed. Let's see it. The bailiff took the USB and inserted it into the monitor. The screen flickered, and then the original security footage played. The courtroom fell into complete silence. The video clearly showed the real thief. A masked man, not Tyler. The jury leaned forward, whispering. Sophia turned to them, keeping her voice calm. This, she said, pointing at the screen, is the real footage from the store's security system. And as you can see, my client is not in it. She turned to Douglas. So tell me, Mr. Douglas. She tilted her head. How exactly did your footage show my client? Douglas's face was unreadable. The judge narrowed his eyes. Mr. Douglas? Care to explain? The prosecution attorney clenched his jaw. He knew he had lost control of the case. Sophia didn't stop. Not only was this footage faked, but the prosecution knew it was faked. She turned to the jury. That means one thing. Someone wanted Tyler to go to prison, even though they knew he was innocent. A woman in the jury gasped. Douglas shifted uncomfortably. The judge turned to him. Mr. Douglas, I hope you can provide an explanation. Douglas forced a smile. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. You presenting false evidence is highly irregular, Sophia shot back. The judge slammed his gavel. Enough. He turned to Douglas. We will be reviewing how this footage was obtained. And if there was any misconduct on the part of the prosecution, he let the words hang. Sophia saw it. The crack in Douglas's mask. She had rattled him. She had turned the case around. And the jury? They were on her side now. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Court is adjourned for today. We will reconvene tomorrow. The gavel banged. It was over. For now. Outside the courthouse, Tyler turned to Sophia, his eyes wide. You did it, he breathed. Sophia exhaled. Not yet. Tyler frowned. What do you mean? You just exposed their entire case. Sophia bit her lip. Douglas isn't giving up that easily. He has power. He has connections. And if someone was willing to fake evidence to send you to jail, she looked at him seriously. Then they still have something to hide. Alex crossed his arms. So what's the next move? Sophia glanced back at the courthouse. She knew Douglas was still inside, probably figuring out his next move. This case wasn't over. Because if someone had set Tyler up, that meant there was someone out there. A real criminal. And if they didn't find out who it was, they could all be in danger. Sophia walked out of the courthouse, the USB still clenched in her fist. The cool air hit her face, but it did nothing to ease the fire burning inside her. She had proven the footage was fake, but that wasn't the end. It wasn't just about winning a trial anymore. Someone had set Tyler up. Someone had faked that video. And whoever they weren't done. Alex fell into step beside her. Okay, so that was awesome, he said. But also terrifying. And now I have to ask, what happens next? Sophia's mind was already racing. We need to find out who actually robbed that store. Tyler frowned. Isn't that the police's job? Sophia shot him a look. The same police who arrested you without looking at the evidence. Tyler sighed. Fair point. Alex rubbed his chin. All right, so where do we start? Sophia stared at the courthouse doors. Douglas didn't make that fake video himself, she said. Someone gave it to him. She turned back to Alex and Tyler. We need to find out who. Alex raised an eyebrow. And how do we do that? Sophia took a deep breath. We go back to the store. Tyler groaned. Oh, not again. An hour later, they were standing in front of the electronics store. This time, they weren't sneaking in. Sophia pushed open the glass door and walked inside. A bell jingled overhead. The store was busy, customers browsing shelves lined with laptops and gaming consoles. A man in a blue employee vest glanced up from behind the counter. He was tall and lean, with tired eyes and messy brown hair. His name tag read, Ryan. Can I help you? He asked. Sophia stepped up to the counter. Yeah, I have a few questions about the security footage from the night of the robbery. Ryan frowned. Wait, aren't you the girl from the trial? The one defending that kid? Sophia nodded. Ryan glanced around nervously. Look, I don't want any trouble. Sophia leaned forward. We just need to know who accessed the footage after the robbery. Ryan hesitated. He glanced toward the manager's office, as if making sure no one was watching. Then, in a low voice, he said, the cops took it. Same night it happened. Sophia's stomach tightened. Which officer? Ryan shook his head. I don't know. But the guy wasn't in uniform. He said he was with the department, but his brow furrowed. Something felt off. Sophia exchanged a look with Alex. Do you remember what he looked like? She asked. Ryan hesitated. Then he nodded. Yeah, tall guy. Blonde hair, kinda slicked back. Expensive suit. Didn't look like a regular cop. Alex's eyebrows shot up. That sounds more like a lawyer than a cop. Sophia's mind was already connecting the pieces. Douglas had gotten the fake footage from someone. Someone with access to the original video. Someone who wasn't a cop. Her stomach churned. This went deeper than she thought. Ryan sighed. Listen, I really shouldn't be talking about this. If my manager finds out, he rubbed the back of his neck. Look, just be careful, okay? That guy didn't seem like someone you want to mess with. Sophia nodded. Thanks, Ryan. She turned and walked out of the store, her heart pounding. Alex jogged to catch up. Okay, so that was useful. What's the next move? Sophia exhaled slowly. We need to find out who that guy was. Tyler hesitated. You don't think Douglas knew the footage was fake, do you? Sophia stopped walking. That thought had crossed her mind. If Douglas had known, then this wasn't just a case of bad prosecution. It was corruption. And if Douglas hadn't known, then someone was playing him, too. Sophia clenched her fists. Either way, they needed answers. And she knew exactly where to start looking. That night, Sophia sat at her desk, her laptop glowing in the darkness. She pulled up a list of private investigators, security firms, and legal consultants in the area. If this mystery man wasn't a cop, then he had to be someone with access to law enforcement records. She scrolled through names, cross-referenced photos, and then she found him. Her breath caught. The man from the store was not a cop. He was a corporate investigator, hired by none other than the biggest law firm in the city. And guess who one of their top lawyers was? Mr. Douglas. Sophia's pulse raced. This wasn't just a case of wrongful arrest. This was deliberate. Someone had wanted Tyler to take the fall, and they had gone to extreme lengths to make it happen. Sophia took a shaky breath. She had just uncovered something big. But before she could react, a notification popped up on her screen. An email. No sender. No subject. Just 2 words. Stop digging. Sophia's stomach dropped. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. This wasn't just about winning the case anymore. This was dangerous. And whoever was behind it, they knew she was getting too close. Sophia stared at the email. Stop digging. Her breath hitched. Someone was watching. Someone knew what she was doing. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should she reply? Ask who this was? No. That would be reckless. She closed her laptop, her heart pounding. Alex was going to freak out when he heard about this. And Tyler? He was in more danger than he even realized. The next morning, Sophia met Alex at the diner across from their school. He had his usual order, a plate of pancakes drowned in syrup, but he barely touched it. When she showed him the email, his face paled. This is bad, he muttered. Sophia sighed. I know. Alex shook his head. No, I mean really bad. You don't just get mysterious emails telling you to stop digging unless you're about to uncover something huge. Sophia chewed her lip. That's what I'm afraid of. Alex leaned closer. So what's the plan? Because if you're thinking of dropping this, I'm not. Alex exhaled, rubbing his face. Of course you're not. Sophia tapped the table. Whoever sent that email is scared. And if they're scared, that means we're close to finding out the truth. Alex shook his head. And what if that truth gets you hurt? Sophia hesitated. That was a possibility. But then she thought about Tyler, locked up for a crime he didn't commit. Thought about how easily someone had been able to manipulate the justice system to frame him. If she backed down now, what would that say about her? She met Alex's gaze. We keep going, she said. Alex groaned. Of course we do. By the time they got to school, Sophia was already working on her next move. She needed more dirt on this investigator, the man who had taken the security footage and faked it. If she could prove he had done something illegal, the case would explode, which meant she had to do something risky, something that might get her expelled. An hour later, she was standing outside the school's administration office, pretending to be checking her phone. Alex stood next to her, arms crossed. I can't believe I let you talk me into this. Sophia smirked. You're the lookout. That's barely even illegal. Alex muttered something under his breath, but Sophia ignored him. She peered through the glass window of the office. The school secretary, Mrs. Halpern, was on the phone, distracted. Perfect. Sophia slipped inside, moving fast. She ducked behind a filing cabinet, heart pounding. The computer was right there. She pulled out a USB drive and plugged it in. The plan was simple. Use a program to access the school's Wi-Fi records. If the investigator had sent an email to Douglas or anyone while using the school's guest network, she could trace it. The program ran. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Come on. The loading bar completed. She yanked out the USB, slipped back out the door, and nearly ran straight into Mrs. Halpern. Miss Carter, the secretary said, raising an eyebrow. What exactly are you doing here? Sophia's brain scrambled. Checking the lost and found. Mrs. Halpern eyed her suspiciously. With a USB in your hand? Sophia swallowed. The silence stretched. Then, Alex leaned in, grinning. She's working on a school project, ma'am. Computer science. Very technical. Very complicated. You wouldn't believe the things they have us doing. Mrs. Halpern sighed. As long as it doesn't involve hacking. Sophia laughed nervously. Of course not. That would be wild. Mrs. Halpern gave her a final look before walking away. Sophia and Alex darted down the hallway. Alex groaned. I hate this. Sophia grinned. But you love the thrill. Alex muttered. I love not being arrested. Back in the library, Sophia plugged the USB into her laptop. She scanned the Wi-Fi records. Her eyes widened. There it was. The investigator had logged into the school's Wi-Fi 2 weeks ago, and the email he had sent was to someone unexpected. Not Douglas, not the police, but the CEO of Crestview Holdings. Sophia frowned. Wait a second. Crestview Holdings? That's... Alex's eyes widened. That's the company that owns the electronics store. Sophia's breath caught. This wasn't just a case of a bad lawyer or a fake video. This was corporate. Crestview Holdings had framed Tyler, and she needed to find out why. But before she could say anything, her phone buzzed. A single text. You were warned. Sophia's blood ran cold. She looked up. Outside the library window, across the street, a black car was parked. The same black car from the night before. And inside, a man was watching her. Sophia's hands went cold. The black car was parked right across the street. The man inside wasn't moving, just watching. Alex followed her gaze and swore under his breath. Tell me that's just a coincidence. Sophia couldn't. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare her anymore. They were watching her. Alex leaned in. What do we do? Sophia exhaled slowly. We act normal. Alex gave her a seriously. Look, I'm not kidding, she whispered. If we freak out, we let them know they're getting to us. Alex groaned. You do realize we're just two high school kids, right? We're not trained spies. What if that guy grabs you? Sophia swallowed hard. She had considered that, but she had come too far to stop now. She turned back to her laptop, pretending not to care that someone was outside, watching their every move. I need to know why Crestview Holdings framed Tyler, she said. Alex tore his eyes away from the window. Okay, let's think. Why would a massive company care about some random high schooler? Sophia bit her lip. It doesn't make sense. Unless. She clicked through the company's financial records. Most big corporations had to report their earnings publicly. If they had something to hide, maybe. She froze. There it was. A sudden, massive insurance payout, dated just days after the electronics store was robbed. Alex leaned over. Wait, are you saying they wanted the store to get robbed? Sophia's stomach twisted. It wasn't about Tyler. It was about the money. Crestview Holdings had taken out a massive insurance policy on the store's inventory. Then, conveniently, a robbery happened. The company got paid millions. But insurance companies investigated fraud. So they needed a fall guy? And that fall guy had been Tyler. Alex let out a slow whistle. That's insane. Sophia's hands clenched into fists. Tyler hadn't just been framed. He had been sacrificed. And the worst part? The people behind this had resources. If they had gone this far to cover up their scheme, they wouldn't let her expose it. Alex nudged her. Problem. Sophia looked up. The man in the black car was getting out. Her pulse spiked. He crossed the street, headed straight for the library doors. We need to go, Alex hissed. Sophia shoved her laptop into her bag. Now. They bolted out the back exit just as the front doors opened. The moment they hit the sidewalk, Alex yanked her into an alley. They pressed against the wall, barely breathing. Footsteps. The man walked past them, scanning the street. Sophia caught a glimpse of him. He was big, muscular, dressed in a sleek black suit. He didn't look like a random thug. He looked professional, a hired enforcer. Her stomach churned. Crestview Holdings wasn't just some greedy corporation. They had people willing to intimidate, maybe even hurt, anyone who got in their way. The man stood still for a moment, scanning the area. Then, after a tense minute, he pulled out his phone, muttered something into it, and walked away. Sophia exhaled. Alex let out a shaky laugh. We are so dead. Sophia clenched her jaw. Not if we stop them first. Alex gaped at her. Stop them? Sophia, they have actual criminals working for them. We are two kids with a laptop. Sophia's brain was racing. They needed proof, real, undeniable proof, that Crestview Holdings had faked the robbery. And she knew exactly where to find it. The insurance company, she whispered. Alex frowned. What? Sophia grabbed his arm. If Crestview Holdings pulled an insurance scam, they had to file paperwork. We need to get our hands on those records. Alex sighed. Let me guess. That means more sneaking into places. Sophia grinned. Now you're getting it. Alex groaned. I hate being your best friend. That night, they sat on the rooftop of an old office building, looking down at their next target, Silverline Insurance. The company that had paid Crestview Holdings after the robbery. Sophia had spent the last 2 hours digging through their online records. But the real dirt? That was locked away in their private server. And the only way to access it was from inside the building. Alex peered over the edge of the roof. Remind me why we couldn't just call the police? Sophia sighed. Because we don't have enough proof yet. If we take this to the cops now, Crestview will bury the evidence before they can investigate. Alex rubbed his temples. I was hoping you'd say something that wasn't insanely dangerous. Sophia smirked. Come on, where's your sense of adventure? Probably lying unconscious in a dumpster after this goes wrong. Sophia ignored him. The building's security wasn't tight, just a single guard patrolling the halls. She had already figured out the guard's schedule. They had exactly 8 minutes to get in, grab the files, and get out. Alex sighed. All right, let's do this. They climbed down the fire escape and slipped in through an unlocked side door. The office was quiet, dark except for the faint hum of computers. Sophia led the way, moving fast. She found the records room and booted up a computer. Her hands flew across the keyboard. Come on. She accessed the insurance claim files. And there it was. A forged document. Crestview Holdings had inflated the value of the stolen goods, claiming almost twice the amount that was actually lost. This wasn't just fraud. It was massive fraud. Sophia copied the files onto her USB. She grinned. We got them. But just as she unplugged the USB, a flashlight beam swept across the room. Alex cursed. Security. The guard had changed his route. And now he was standing in the doorway. Who's there? The guard barked. Alex panicked. Hi. We're, new interns. Sophia resisted the urge to slap him. The guard's eyes narrowed. You think I'm stupid? He reached for his radio. Sophia acted on instinct. She grabbed a stapler off the desk and hurled it at the light switch. The room went pitch black. Run, she yelled. She grabbed Alex's arm and bolted. The guard swore and fumbled for his flashlight. Sophia and Alex tore down the hallway, their footsteps echoing. They reached the emergency exit and slammed straight into someone else. A man in a black suit. Not a guard. Not a cop. Sophia's stomach dropped. Crestview's hired muscle. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. You should have listened, he growled. Alex swung his backpack at the guy's face. The man staggered, just enough for Sophia to yank free. They sprinted through the door and out into the alley. Behind them, the guard and the enforcer shouted. But Sophia didn't stop. She had the evidence. And now? She just had to survive long enough to use it. Sophia and Alex sprinted through the alley, their footsteps echoing off the brick walls. Behind them, the security guard and the hired enforcer were gaining ground. Left. Sophia gasped, yanking Alex toward a side street. They dodged overflowing trash bins and leaped over a fallen sign. Sophia's heart pounded. She still clutched the USB drive in her fist. They had the proof. But if they got caught, it wouldn't matter. Alex panted beside her. We need to do something before we get grabbed. Up ahead, a row of parked cars lined the street, and one of them had an open driver's side window. Sophia didn't hesitate. She grabbed Alex's arm and dragged him toward it. Get in, she hissed. Alex's eyes widened. You know how to hotwire a car? Sophia shoved him inside. No, but I read about it once. Alex groaned. This is not the time for trial and error. Sophia's hands trembled as she yanked wires from beneath the dashboard. Footsteps pounded behind them. The enforcer's voice rang out. Stop running, kid. You cannot win this fight. Sophia gritted her teeth. She was going to win. The engine roared to life. Alex hooped. Yes. Sophia slammed her foot on the gas. The car peeled out of the parking spot just as the enforcer lunged. His hands grazed the back of the car, but they were already speeding away. Sophia's hands gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. Alex twisted in his seat, watching as the figures behind them shrank into the distance. We're alive. He let out a shaky laugh. We're actually alive. Sophia exhaled, finally letting herself breathe. But they weren't safe yet. She had to get to someone who could use this evidence before Crestview could cover their tracks. And there was only one person who had the power to make this matter. The judge. They reached the courthouse just after sunrise. Sophia skidded to a stop outside the towering stone building and jumped out of the stolen car. Alex blinked at her. Should we, return this? We'll deal with that later. Sophia grabbed his arm and pulled him inside. The courthouse was already filling with lawyers, clerks, and reporters. Word had spread about her case. People were watching, waiting to see if the teenage girl defending a criminal case would actually pull off a miracle. Sophia didn't care about the cameras. She pushed her way through the halls, heading straight for Judge Reynolds' office. A security officer stepped in front of her. Miss Carter? What are you doing here before court is in session? I need to speak to the judge, Sophia said. The guard frowned. He's preparing for today's hearing. You can't just barge in. Sophia stood on her toes, trying to look past him. This is urgent. It's about the case. A voice interrupted. Let her in. Judge Reynolds stood in the doorway of his office, his robe half on, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked tired, but intrigued. Sophia shoved the USB drive forward. You need to see this. Minutes later, Judge Reynolds sat at his desk, watching the real insurance records on his monitor. Alex and Sophia stood across from him, waiting. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. Miss Carter, do you understand what you've uncovered? Sophia nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge sighed. This isn't just a simple case of false prosecution. This is corporate crime, a fraudulent insurance claim, planted evidence, witness tampering. He exhaled. This could bring down multiple people in power. Sophia swallowed. So will you use it? Reynolds didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the screen. Alex nudged Sophia. He looks way too serious. Reynolds finally spoke. If this is real, and if we can verify its authenticity, Crestview Holdings is in trouble. He looked at Sophia. Are you sure this is all of it? Sophia hesitated. Something still nagged at her. They had proof that Crestview committed fraud. Proof that Tyler had been framed. But who had given Douglas the fake footage? Who had orchestrated this whole thing? There was still one missing piece. I think, she said slowly, there's one more person behind this. Reynolds studied her. Then I suggest you find them fast. He stood, tucking the USB into his pocket. Court starts in an hour. And if this is as real as you say, this trial is about to take a very different turn. Sophia exhaled. They had done it. They had gotten the evidence to someone who mattered. Now all they had to do was survive the fallout. Courtroom 3 was packed by the time Sophia and Tyler walked in. Reporters lined the back row. Lawyers whispered to each other. Even law students had come just to witness the trial. The energy was electric. Something big was about to happen. Sophia took her seat at the defense table, her hands steady. Tyler sat beside her, his face a mix of hope and fear. Mr. Douglas stood across the room, his face unreadable. Judge Reynolds entered, and the room fell silent. He sat down, cleared his throat, and said, "This court has received new evidence that significantly impacts this case." Whispers erupted. Douglas's eyes narrowed. Reynolds turned to Sophia. "Miss Carter, please approach the bench." Sophia rose. This was it. She stepped forward, every muscle in her body tense. The entire courtroom was watching. And just as she reached the bench, the side doors of the courtroom burst open. A security officer rushed inside. He leaned down and whispered something to Judge Reynolds. Reynolds' expression froze. Then, he turned to the court. "There has been a development," he announced. Sophia's stomach tightened. "What kind of development?" she asked carefully. The judge's eyes met hers. "The prosecution's star witness," he said, "has just been found unconscious in a hotel room." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Sophia's heart stopped. Something was very wrong. And whatever was happening, it wasn't just about Tyler anymore. The courtroom erupted into whispers. Sophia's mind raced. The prosecution's star witness, the one who had supposedly seen Tyler at the scene, was unconscious? What did that mean? She turned toward Douglas. For the first time, the smug prosecutor didn't look confident. He looked shaken. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel. Order in the court. The murmurs faded. He turned to Douglas. "Mr. Douglas, do you have any information about this?" Douglas hesitated. He cleared his throat, but his usual smooth confidence was gone. Your Honor, I just received word myself. I don't have details yet." Sophia's stomach twisted. This wasn't random. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. She glanced at Alex, who was sitting in the gallery. He was already typing furiously on his phone, probably looking up news about the witness. Reynolds sighed. "Given this development, the court will take a recess. We need clarity before we proceed." The gavel came down, but Sophia barely heard it. Because she knew, whoever had silenced the prosecution's witness might come for her next. Outside the courthouse, Alex caught up with her. "I found it." He shoved his phone toward her. A news article flashed on the screen. "Key witness in Crestview case found unconscious, possible overdose." Sophia's stomach dropped. "Overdose?" Alex nodded grimly. "Yeah, except," he lowered his voice, "this guy had no history of drug use. And guess what? No security cameras in the hallway of his hotel." Sophia inhaled sharply. This wasn't an accident. Someone had made sure he wouldn't testify. Tyler ran a hand through his hair. "So what now? If their witness is out, isn't that good for us?" Sophia bit her lip. "It means their case is weaker, but it also means whoever's behind this is getting desperate." Alex glanced around. "We need to be really careful. If they took him out, what's stopping them from coming after you?" Sophia's hands curled into fists. That thought had already crossed her mind. But she couldn't stop now. Not when they were this close. That night, Sophia sat at her desk, staring at her laptop screen. The case had changed. It wasn't just about exposing Crestview Holdings anymore. It was about surviving long enough to do it. She opened her messages. A new email sat at the top. No sender. No subject. Just one line. "Back off, Sophia. You're in over your head." Her breath hitched. They knew her name. This wasn't just about the case. It was personal now. Sophia inhaled shakily, then started typing. Not backing off. See you in court. She hit send. Alex was going to kill her for that. But she wasn't backing down. The next morning, she walked into the courtroom with her head high. Douglas sat stiffly at the prosecution table. He looked off, like someone had talked to him. The judge entered. Reynolds cleared his throat. Mr. Douglas, given yesterday's incident, does the prosecution wish to continue? Douglas hesitated. Then, slowly he stood. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to drop all charges against Tyler Davis. The courtroom exploded. Gasps. Reporters scrambling to take notes. Tyler froze. What? Sophia's heart leaped. She had won. Douglas turned to her, his jaw clenched. You did this, he muttered under his breath. Sophia met his gaze evenly. No, the truth did this. Reynolds banged his gavel. Order. He looked at Tyler. Mr. Davis, you are free to go. Tyler's shoulders slumped in relief. Sophia exhaled. It was over. Or was it? As the courtroom emptied, she noticed something. Douglas wasn't packing up. He was just sitting there, staring at his hands, like a man who had just realized he was in way over his head. Sophia walked over. You didn't want to drop the case, did you? Douglas looked up. His face was pale. You don't get it, do you? Sophia frowned. Douglas leaned in, lowering his voice. You think you won? He murmured. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. Sophia's spine tingled. Douglas swallowed. There's more, Carter. So much more. And if you keep digging, you won't like what you find. Sophia's fingers twitched. What was he talking about? Douglas shook his head. You're in over your head. Sophia squared her shoulders. Then I guess I'll have to learn how to swim. Douglas gave a hollow laugh. Then good luck. He stood, gathered his briefcase, and walked away. Sophia watched him go, her mind spinning. She had won the case. But she had a feeling. This was just the beginning. Sophia should have been celebrating. She had just done the impossible, defended a case in a real courtroom, exposed a massive corporate fraud, and freed an innocent person. But she wasn't celebrating. Because Douglas's words kept ringing in her ears. You think you won? You have no idea what you've just stepped into. Something was wrong. Something bigger than just a fake security tape and a fraudulent insurance claim. And whatever it was, it wasn't over. That night, she sat in her room, staring at her laptop. The news was everywhere. Teenage lawyer in training destroys prosecution in court. Crestview Holdings under scrutiny after fraud claims. Sophia Carter, legal prodigy or just reckless? She scrolled past the articles. They all focused on her, not the real story. And that's what worried her. Someone wanted people talking about her courtroom stunt, not about the real criminals. A distraction, a cover-up. She clicked into her emails, heart pounding. Sure enough, an anonymous message sat in her inbox. Stop. Sophia clenched her fists. No sender. No explanation. Just a warning. She stared at the screen, pulse racing. Then she did something reckless. She typed back. Why? What are you hiding? She hit send. Her hands trembled. Then, a reply popped up. Instantly. As if someone had been waiting for her response. Walk away, Sophia, or you won't get another chance. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't a game anymore. Someone was watching her. And they weren't bluffing. The next morning, Sophia met Alex at the diner. He was already mid-rant when she sat down. Are you insane? He shoved his phone in her face. You just got an anonymous threat, and your first instinct was to email them back. Sophia sipped her coffee. I wanted answers. Alex groaned. And I want not to die before I turn 18. Tyler sat beside him, looking equally worried. Sophia, this isn't just a random warning. If they have the power to fake evidence, silence witnesses, and get a case dismissed before things got too messy, he took a deep breath. We're dealing with dangerous people. Sophia folded her arms. Exactly. And that's why we can't stop now. Alex threw his hands up. Great. Love that. Fantastic. Tyler hesitated. Do you at least have a plan? Sophia nodded. Douglas said there's more to this. She leaned in. We need to find out what. Alex frowned. But he already walked away. You think he's just going to hand us more information? Sophia smirked. No. But he's already given us everything we need. Tyler blinked. What? Sophia pulled out her phone and opened a tab. Douglas worked for Mayfield and Locke, right? Alex nodded slowly. Yeah, the biggest law firm in the city. Sophia tapped the screen. And guess who also represents Crestview Holdings? Tyler inhaled sharply. No way. Sophia nodded. Mayfield and Locke. Douglas's own firm. That's why he had the fake footage. That's why he backed down so easily. Alex frowned. So what are you saying? Sophia's jaw tightened. If we want to know what's really going on, she said, we have to go straight to the source. Alex blinked. You mean? Sophia nodded. We break into Mayfield and Locke. Alex groaned, burying his face in his hands. I hate being your best friend. Later that night, Sophia and Alex crouched behind a row of bushes outside the towering law firm. The building was sleek and modern, glass windows reflecting the city skyline. Security cameras lined the entrance. Alex exhaled. Okay, before we fully commit to this terrible idea, please tell me you have an actual plan. Sophia grinned. Of course I do. Alex muttered. That doesn't make me feel better. Sophia pointed to a service entrance at the back. That door leads to the server room. Alex frowned. And how do you know that? Sophia smirked. Because I called earlier and pretended to be an IT intern. They told me where to go. Alex groaned. I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Sophia pulled out her phone. Once we're inside, I'll plug in this USB. It'll copy every case file linked to Crestview Holdings. Alex hesitated. And if we get caught? Sophia exhaled. They couldn't afford to get caught. Then we talk our way out. Alex nodded. Okay, let's do this. They slipped through the alley, pressing against the wall. Sophia pulled out a small toolkit and knelt by the door. Alex blinked. Wait, you know how to pick locks now? Sophia smirked. I read about it once. Alex groaned. Unbelievable. Click. The door swung open. They crept inside, heartbeats thudding in sync. The server room was at the end of the hall. So far, so good. Sophia led the way, her eyes scanning for movement. They reached the door. Sophia plugged in the USB and started the data transfer. The files began copying. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. Alex exhaled. This is going way too smoothly. Then, the elevator dinged. Sophia's stomach plummeted. Footsteps. A shadow moved around the corner. Alex whispered, "What now?" Sophia's brain scrambled. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed Alex and shoved him into the nearest office. The door clicked shut behind them just as the footsteps passed by. Alex was breathing heavily. "We are so dead." Sophia pressed an ear to the door. The footsteps faded. She exhaled. Not dead yet. She peeked through the blinds. A security guard stood by the server room. He wasn't leaving. Sophia cursed under her breath. The files were still transferring. They had to get back in there. Alex leaned in. Ideas? Sophia bit her lip. Then, she spotted something on the desk. An ID badge. A lawyer's pass. She grinned. Alex groaned. Oh no. I know that look. That's your bad idea look. Sophia grabbed the badge. Time to improvise. She stepped out of the office, swiping the badge through the security panel. The guard turned. Who are you? Sophia plastered on a confident smile. I'm an intern, she said smoothly. I left my laptop in the server room. The guard frowned. Sophia held up the badge. The real badge. The guard hesitated. Then he sighed. Make it quick. Sophia forced herself to walk, not run, into the server room. The files had finished copying. She grabbed the USB, tucked it into her pocket, and strolled out like she belonged there. Alex stared at her in awe. Did that just work? He whispered. Sophia grinned. Told you. Improv. Alex exhaled. I hate how good you are at this. They slipped out the back door. They had done it. But as they disappeared into the night, Sophia knew. The real fight was just beginning. Sophia and Alex sprinted down the alley, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The USB drive in Sophia's pocket felt like it was burning a hole through her jacket. They had done it. They had broken into Mayfield and Locke and stolen the files tying them to Crestview Holdings. But they weren't safe yet. Alex pulled her into a side street, leaning against the wall. Please tell me, he panted. That was the last break-in of my life. Sophia smirked. We'll see. Alex groaned. That means no. She glanced over her shoulder. The law firm was still in the distance, its towering glass windows reflecting the city lights. No alarms. No shouting. No one chasing them. Yet. We need to move, she said. Alex pushed off the wall. Where to? Sophia tightened her grip on the USB. Somewhere safe. But before they could take another step, a car screeched around the corner. A black sedan. The same one that had been watching her for days. Alex cursed. Oh, come on. The doors slammed open, and two men in suits stepped out. Not cops. Not security. Crestview's people. One of them reached into his jacket. Sophia's blood ran cold. "Run," she shouted. They bolted. The men pursued. The streets blurred as Sophia ran. Footsteps pounded behind her. She darted into a crowded intersection, weaving between honking cars. Alex followed close behind. One of the men lunged. Sophia twisted at the last second, ducking into a narrow alley. Alex barely made it in after her. The men stopped at the entrance, scanning. The alley was dark. Sophia grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him behind a dumpster. Her heart pounded. The men stepped forward. Their voices were low. She couldn't have gone far. Sophia held her breath. The footsteps came closer. Alex was tense beside her. Then, a siren blared in the distance. The men hesitated. Then, without a word, they turned and disappeared back into their car. Sophia exhaled slowly. They were being watched. And whoever was behind this wasn't playing games anymore. They made it to Alex's house without any more close calls. He locked the door behind them. "Okay, that was officially the worst night of my life." Sophia pulled out the USB. "But we got what we needed." Alex ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, and almost got killed in the process." She ignored him, plugging the drive into his laptop. The files loaded. Sophia's stomach tightened. Hundreds of documents. Emails. Bank transfers. Proof that Crestview Holdings orchestrated the fake robbery. But one file stood out. A single document. Sophia clicked it. Her breath caught. It was a confidential memo. From Crestview Holdings Board of Directors to Mayfield and Locke Legal Team Subject. Emergency Contingency Plan. She skimmed the text, eyes widening. Crestview hadn't just framed Tyler. They had done this before. Multiple times. Other stores. Other cases. They had built an empire on fake insurance claims, burying anyone who got too close. Alex read over her shoulder. "Holy," he trailed off. Sophia clenched her fists. This was bigger than she thought. She turned to Alex. "We're going public." Alex's eyes widened. "Like, press conference public." Sophia nodded. "If we expose this, Crestview can't silence it." Alex hesitated. "What if they try?" Sophia exhaled. "Then we make sure everyone is watching." The next morning, Sophia sent an email. Not to the cops, not to the court, but to the biggest investigative journalist in the country. A reporter known for exposing corruption. An hour later, her phone buzzed. A single text. "Interested. Meet in 2 hours. Location sent separately." Sophia exhaled. This was it. The final move. They arrived at a quiet cafe downtown. The journalist, Daniel Harrington, sat in a corner booth. He was in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Sophia slid into the seat across from him. He studied her. "You're the girl from the trial." Sophia nodded. "And I have something bigger." She handed him the USB. Harrington plugged it into his tablet, scrolling through the files. His expression darkened. "You realize what you're sitting on, right?" he said. Sophia nodded. "This isn't just one fraud case," Harrington continued. "This is systemic corruption. If this goes public," he exhaled, "a lot of powerful people are going down." Sophia's hands tightened in her lap. "That's the plan." Harrington smirked. "I like you, kid." He tapped his phone. "I'll run this story. And when I do, Crestview's finished." Sophia exhaled. It was finally happening. Then, a text popped up on her phone. "Block number, final warning. Walk away." Sophia's stomach twisted. Harrington noticed her reaction. Something wrong. Sophia hesitated. Then she shook her head. "No." She met his gaze. "Let's take them down." Harrington grinned. "Let's." The world changed overnight. By morning, the headline was everywhere. Crestview Holdings exposed in massive insurance fraud scandal. Daniel Harrington had wasted no time. His article was brutal, detailing years of fraud, corruption, and the company's pattern of framing innocent people like Tyler. The evidence was undeniable. Emails, documents, financial records. It was all there. And Sophia's name was right in the middle of it. Her inbox flooded with messages. Journalists wanted interviews. Lawyers wanted statements. People from across the country were calling her a hero. But not everyone was happy. Because Crestview wasn't going down without a fight. That afternoon, Sophia sat in a coffee shop, her phone buzzing nonstop. Alex scrolled through news articles, shaking his head. Crestview is spiraling. He turned his screen toward her. Stock prices are crashing. Investors are bailing. And their CEO? He grinned. Arrested this morning. Sophia exhaled. It worked. She could hardly believe it. The company that had framed Tyler, the company that had threatened her, was finally being held accountable. But something still felt unfinished. Alex nudged her. What's wrong? Sophia bit her lip. Douglas. Alex frowned. What about him? He warned me, she murmured. Told me this went deeper. Alex hesitated. You think there's more? Sophia exhaled. I think we took down Crestview. But someone let it happen. Alex's brows furrowed. Like, on purpose? Sophia nodded. Douglas had backed down too easily. The case had collapsed without a fight. Someone had wanted Crestview to fall. But why? Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed. A message. Block number. You made the right choice. But this was only the beginning. Sophia's breath caught. Alex peered over her shoulder. Oh, come on. Who even are these people? Sophia didn't answer. Because, deep down, she already knew. Crestview had fallen. But there were bigger players in this game. And whoever they weren't finished with her yet. That evening, Sophia stood outside the courthouse. Tyler walked up beside her, hands in his pockets. It's over. Sophia smiled. For now. Tyler sighed. You really can't just enjoy the win, can you? Sophia laughed. Maybe for a little while. Tyler grinned. Good. Because I owe you a lifetime of burgers and milkshakes. Sophia smirked. I will hold you to that. Alex jogged up to them, waving his phone. Guess what? Sophia raised an eyebrow. What? Alex grinned. A law firm reached out. He tossed her the phone. They want to talk to you. Sophia blinked. Wait. What? Alex smirked. Sophia, you just exposed $1 billion scandal as a high schooler. People are noticing. Tyler laughed. I bet she'll have a full-time job before she even graduates. Sophia stared at the message on Alex's phone. A real law firm. A real offer. For a second, she felt overwhelmed. But then she smiled. Because she had started this fight to help one person. And now, she had the chance to help so many more. Sophia Carter wasn't just some teenager who had stumbled into a courtroom. She was a lawyer in the making. And this was only the beginning. Sophia Carter had changed the game. What started as a desperate attempt to save an innocent friend had turned into something far greater. She had exposed corruption, stood her ground against some of the most powerful people in the city, and proved that justice wasn't reserved for those with expensive suits and law degrees. She had made history. But more importantly, she had made a difference. The world knew her name now. Some people saw her as a hero. Others saw her as a threat. But Sophia didn't care about labels. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about fame, or attention, or even proving herself. It was about doing what was right. And if there was one thing she had learned through all of this, it was that the fight for justice never truly ends. Because as long as there were people being silenced, as long as there were powerful forces trying to manipulate the system, as long as there were innocent people like Tyler who needed someone to stand up for them, Sophia Carter wouldn't stop. She was no longer just a high schooler. She was a force to be reckoned with. And this was just the beginning. As she walked away from the courthouse, the wind brushing against her face, she knew one thing for sure. No matter where life took her, she would always fight for the truth. No matter how big the enemy. No matter how impossible the odds. Because justice wasn't just something that happened. It was something you made happen. And she was ready for whatever came next.